Another way that we're really utilizing AI for our frontline teams is really in one of our technical support tools where AI can help review what's happening, help craft that message back for the frontline expert that they can share with the customer. In this scenario, it really becomes helpful whether it's new employees or crafting a fairly technical message that an engineer has put together into something that a customer can understand. Because customers don't love it when you talk engineer speak to them, and having that translation. So we're using AI to be able to do some of that as well. That is again pulling together a lot of information in a much quicker manner. And so I think having AI able to really supercharge that analysis or those insights so then the teams can apply the knowledge that they know about the customer and the information that they have around the situation to be able to give the customer the best answer.
Hello, and welcome to the CX Files podcast. Today's guest is Kimberly Wyman. She's the Vice President, Strategic Advisor, T-Mobile for Business. She's 20 plus years experience leading large-scale global organizations across functions like customer experience, GTM, service, and platform operations. She's been on an incredible career trajectory, starting as a senior manager in 2006, moving to a VP role in 2016, and she's since held multiple VP roles and throughout has been a people-focused leader that's obsessed with empowering frontline teams and customers. Kimberly, thanks for joining.
It's great to be here, Ben. Thank you.
I always like to ask about a background story, an origin story, if you will, in customer experience. Can you share a story from early in your career where something surprised you or you had a challenging experience, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I remember a situation where we were launching a product and we had significant system failures that happened. Right? And as fast as we would find the mitigation plan, we would discover a new issue. And it just kept going and going. And it was there that I really learned a design for breakpoints. We would create our experience journey and then specifically stop and look at each of the steps and ask ourselves, what's going to go wrong, break? And then we would spend time either changing that or really, what would be the mitigation if it happened? And like I said, lots of late nights figuring those things out. But what we really ended up with when we designed experience with breakpoints in mind, it helped us either prevent the issue before it happened, or it helps you it faster when they do happen. And I use that today. I still today every design experience design that we do, we look for where is it going to break and how do we prevent that.
It's a great proactive approach. I think a lot of leaders who maybe don't have that background or that experience to know that, to imagine that, it becomes this reactive sort of function by default. Can you talk a little bit about proactive approaches? If there's something else you thought of or some other inspiration you got around that?
Yeah, it's just stopping and spending the time to think about the stuff. It doesn't take that much time to really stop, and look at the experience. And, it's why I love experience journeys versus process flows. It's why I love doing it from the customer lens or the frontline teams lens, because there can be a little bit different in both of those because it helps you identify where things could go wrong. And it gives you that minute, that 5, 10 minutes spent ahead of time catch so many hours of crisis. And I really learned that, like I said, through cases dealing with crises that were happening or situations that were going the wrong direction and trying to have to fix it in the moment. And it's so much easier if you can try to think at least through a lot of it ahead of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think just as humans, it's easy to forget that our brains work very differently when we're in kind of crisis control mode, when we're in an emergency. And if you can front load that thinking, if you can prepare, whether it's in the case of a family, right? Maybe you have an emergency response plan for the family. Or what do we do when there's a fire alarm? What do we do if there's an earthquake or something? And so in the moment, it's everybody has the plan in mind already, and you don't have to build it on the fly.
Yeah. And your senior leadership, you can all form them, so they already know what you're going to do if the problem happens. So it actually speeds up that resolution. It also, especially if that mitigation may not be the most optimal experience, people are already understanding that. You don't end up having to get questioned on why are we doing something or how to do it. And so it became really part of what my team and I reeled into all of our experiences with new launches was okay, what's going to happen if? And what would have to be true to be able to solve that. And the more we could do those things up front, it it made launches. One, we typically then had less issues because we actually fixed a lot of them. But then, like I said, when they do happen, they're kind of a non-issue because you know what you need to do and you don't end up having to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Reducing the panic factor is huge. I wanted to ask you, you recently wrote a post on LinkedIn saying something along the lines of CX is not a department, it's a decision framework. And of course, it's pretty common in most businesses. You have these specific departments, you have support slash care slash success, depending on your business. You have sales, you have marketing, and so on. But when you're in a high stakes meeting and everyone is like looking at the costs, how do you actually, practically speaking, get executives, get leadership to look at it through the customer lens, this holistic view of the experience, instead of do that without losing sight of like revenue impact, P&L impact?
Yeah. And I think what a lot of times people think is it's one or the other. And it doesn't have to be. But when have a customer experience that this you do, which from a T-Mobile perspective, that is part of that is a design factor of how we go to business, how we actually take care of our customers. But when it's part of that decision framework throughout your company, you don't really have to shift the conversation to look through the customer lens because it's already there. But with that said, it is still important to always have a leader or more that is thinking about how changes that are going to be implemented are going to impact the customer. So that way it's not overlooked. I continue to be that seat at the table many times throughout my career, and still, I'm always counted on to bring the customer's perspective. It's not always the most popular seat at the table. It's an important one, but it also doesn't mean that you have to make changes, completely change off costs because we all are business owners, right? We all need the bottom line to have the right numbers, whether you're in service, whether you're in sales, whether you're in, other back office functions. So we're always going to have to make decisions to implement changes that may not be the easiest for customers. But if we have a customer lens, we're always going to make it the best it can be with the least impact. Doesn't mean you're not going to do hard things, doesn't mean you're not going to do things your customers don't like, but you're going to do it with less impact to them, or you're going to prepare your frontline teams on how to answer the questions that they're going to have differently. So it's not about not making decisions because you need to, but it's how do you still do it with that lens of the customer, because it's going to end up being a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that so many things in business and in life are trade-offs, right? It's a strategic consideration. And there is no perfect all around, make everything better without making anybody unhappy or without even having some friction or something. There's always a bit of a give and take. But with creativity, of course, you can minimize the impact. You can minimize the friction. You can proactively communicate. And I think that's so important for people to realize that yeah, you do have to make tough calls, right? You have to do the hard thing sometimes. But if you're upfront about it, if you're clear about it, people are generally pretty understanding. I want to ask you another question here. One of the things that you've also shared publicly is this idea of a decision framework that asks the question, would the customer applaud this? Can you take us inside a time or an experience you had where maybe you chose a more difficult path simply because you knew that the easy answer wouldn't earn that applause?
Yeah, one of the situations we had years ago, we had some devices for customers. It wasn't actually anything that was a problem with us. It was actually the manufacturer, but we needed to be able to exchange this out. And the easiest thing would be tell customers you got to go to a store. Go to a store, they'll get you a new device, we'll take care of it. But we all know that that's a significant burden for customers. You have customers that can't get to stores, it's not convenient, and it was going to be a frustrating situation. Now, mind you, weren't set up to be able to do these exchange of devices for the manufacturer. So, we had to create some creative system ways to actually do this. So the easy thing would have been just tell the customer their only option was to go into a store. Instead, we took some of that burden, created a way that a customer could still contact us. We could still handle that exchange over the phone. Like I said, even though it wasn't utilizing any of the traditional systems or the ways that we would be doing that decision to take on that additional burden to train our frontline teams on how to handle it. Again, telling the customer their best experience was going to be to go into a store. But we had that way that a customer, if that wasn't a viable option, that would do. And it did. It took manual back end work. It took definitely, we had some burden on our teams, back at our headquarters. But in the end, the customer at least had a option if they couldn't actually go into a store. So sometimes it's about taking on some of that burden, the customer. Again, there can be costs sometimes associated with it, or in some cases, it might just be asking, frontline teams to have a little bit harder conversation and preparing that. So in some cases, it's a little bit of operation, or you got more creative. Be willing to know that maybe it's not going to be perfect, but it was going to at least give the customer that option.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think again an example of proactive communication in play. I think there's so often these transitions that happen, these change points, and I think it's clear from your answers and from what you've been sharing that you think really deeply about these transitions. The first example you gave, being ready for when it breaks, talking about the communication techniques, talking about how you do the messaging. Can you maybe expand a little bit more on this? And is there like a kickoff meeting process that you like to run? Is there some kind of, what's the secret weapon here as far as getting ahead of these kind of things?
I spend a lot of time, and throughout my career have spent a lot of time and really encouraged my team to do that in looking at the customer journeys. And it's really, I always look at the journey from a customer perspective and the frontline expense perspective, because it's very easy to go through and things look really good on the happy path from a system perspective. But what are the nuts? And how do you actually spend more time there than on the happy path? A lot of times, that's what gets shown. It's like, here's the happy path, here's how we're going to launch it. It's taken to all of the senior leaders, and nobody brings up but these are all the things that could go wrong. And so building early on in, our process, say, these are the things that could go wrong. This is what we're going to do about them. Trust and confidence with your senior leaders that, oh, you're thinking about this. And the more I actually did that, the more I actually encouraged my team to be able to look at that. They started doing that before I even reviewed it. And so you start to then get that all through your organization, and you can do that much more work, fewer people, that create better experience. I also would say, some of the things is each business group is going to have their own kind of KPIs and things that they're doing, right? Our marketing partners are going to be focused on how do we go drive, the numbers they need to hit. Our sales partners, they've got numbers they need to hit. I on the service side that I needed to make sure I hit. And when everybody respects everybody else's, kind of goals and KPIs that they have, but work together towards that one goal, you can also create the best experience. So there's some natural push and pull there, but it actually is a lot of fun. And it's really where you start to create the best experiences for your customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's I think this is probably a good point to segue and talk a little bit about the AI landscape as you see it and how you're thinking about that tactically and as a team. Currently, I believe you lead a large global team. Can you share some ways that AI is helping your team to do more and helping you to maybe to be more proactive or to get ahead of problems?
There's two ways that I'll share. One, utilizing AI to supercharge our frontline teams. One where I think a lot of companies are starting here, and I think it's a good place to really start as well. I don't know about thousands, tens of thousands of knowledge-based articles. And if you are in a type environment or, chat or however, time is important. Time is money. And so to find that information quickly and the right information not only can, improve how long you have a customer on the phone or, in a chat, but it also can accuracy of the information providing customer. We've really, done a lot there around applying AI into the knowledge base, so it can help articulate and pull together the information in a very quick manner. Because we ask our teams to know a lot. There's a lot of things out there we ask them to know. There's lots of different plans customers are on. Some are new, some are old. And so being able to get that information and give the customer the right information at the time drives improvements and costs down in the business. Another way that we're really utilizing AI for our frontline teams is really in one of our technical support tools, where AI can help review what's happening, help craft that message back for the frontline expert that they can share with the customer. In this scenario, it really becomes helpful whether employees or crafting a fairly tech message that an engineer has put together in customer can understand. Because customers don't love it when you talk engineer speak to them. And having that translation. So we're using AI to be able to do some of that as well. That is again pulling together a lot of information in a much quicker manner. And so I think having AI able to really supercharge that analysis or those insights, so then the teams can, apply the knowledge that they know about the customer and the information that they have around the situation to be able to give customer the best answer in a quick manner, because nobody loves to spend a lot of having to solve problems. Like I said, whether that's phone or email or however it is, customers actually don't want to talk to you a long time, and it's an expensive piece for the company.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely spot on. I think the sort of most clear application of AI, the most clear outcome is around some kind of efficiency gain. Time saved is usually the metric. Is there another side of this, perhaps, that you'd like to talk about? One of the things, for example, is on the input side. We often focus on the output of our tools. We focus on what is the AI delivering to me? What is the output? But on the input side, I mean, you have thousands of knowledge base articles, maybe tens of thousands of knowledge base articles. How do you think about getting the right data into the AI so that the output is quality?
Still exploring in that space and really, I would say testing a lot in that space to understand what is the right input, and how do you do that. And I think that's where a lot of companies are at. A lot of companies are really looking at how do you test, train, understand, adjust, and how do you also listen to teams in what they think would be helpful, from which we've done a lot of, in really helping our teams say, hey, what would be helpful? How can we do that? And so I think a lot of that is still in testing and learning and exploring. And so a lot of really, really fun things happening, in different areas, and then, kind of seeing what's going to rise to the top, and then, share it out across, the larger groups.
Absolutely. One of the news stories, I think it came out last year, there was a public announcement about a partnership between T-Mobile and OpenAI called Intent CX with this idea of predicting intent, predicting needs. Can you comment about that partnership in broad terms, if you will? Um, what has it been like to set up? Any challenges you've come along the way?
And I would say, in a general sense, not commenting specifically about the partnership, but in general, how we think about kind of those predictive experiences, and that is creating the right foundation of data. And that's one of the things that we've spent, specifically in the business area, and done a great job in the past couple of years of really pulling together the data, and looking at how do you get the right around the data? How do you identify the right ways to bring fragmented? I just had a little bit about bringing fragmented data together, with some peers across the industry, and bringing that together is so important. It can be so powerful once you get bring fragmented data together, because we all have it, right? Everybody's got multiple systems. Things live in different places, and so being that together in one management way is such an unlock, from an AI perspective. So that's really where a lot of it has been focused recently. Now that allows us to be able to look at that predictive experience, be able to understand, and have the core together. So that's been a big piece of where we've focused, and it's going to unlock, a lot of opportunities to do things more predictive, as we go into the coming months and years.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. I think of, again, going back to your first comments, right? This thinking of where it can break, preparing, predicting the future, if you will, making an intelligent estimation of where things are going to go and be ahead of them. And it sounds like you're thinking about using AI to enhance that process or enhance that capability. And I hope that other people can take notes from this as well, because it is easy to get stuck in the reactive thinking. It is easy to think of AI as this thing that happens after the fact, but the prediction power of it is an untapped opportunity, I think, or maybe underappreciated.
The things
Yeah,
that will be important as we really go into, a phase in service worlds where AI is doing those experiences for you, taking that journey and looking at an AI agent in that customer journey and saying, okay, where's potentially going to be the problems? Where do I need to impact to like how it's happening? Those are going to be important things. I think, we'll shift, and focus in that way in the future. It's going to be an important piece not to skip. Otherwise, you're going to end up with potentially an experience that you don't love, and that maybe you didn't even realize happening if you don't have the right inspection on that. So I think the evolution in building those customer journeys with, the AI, agents out there.
absolutely. Yeah, I could dig into the AI agent thing. I think I'll save it this time, but it's definitely exciting to see where things are going with personal AI agents in recent months, especially as this OpenClaw project that's become extremely popular. People are building their own personal AI agents. Of course, businesses are deploying them in scale, and I think that there's a conversation there. But I wanted to ask you, one of the one of the things that I think T-Mobile is doing really well just from my perspective as a consumer, as somebody who has a cell phone plan, basically, is communicating publicly, whether it's through advertising or marketing other channels. But T-Mobile really feels like a future forward, a future proof, ahead of the curve kind of company. And it's starting to make your competitors look bad, like they're behind the times, I think. But can you talk a little bit about the future proofing, about the future focus at T-Mobile, and what's the kind of infrastructure there that you've set up to be ready for the future?
I think, in maybe a couple comments in general, right? As a technology company, one of the things that we've always continued to do and will continue to do is look at how do we solve pain points we do. And so whether it, was the parts of the world that didn't have coverage that we with T satellite, whether it were language challenges that we just announced at our recent Capital Markets Day with the live translation, we're always looking at ways that we solve problems for customers, and that just goes back to who we are, how we operate, and that the customer is at the center of what we do. And so I would say we will continue to always look at that as the world continues to evolve and we continue to think about 6G look like and all of that. It's really always going to have the customer at the center, and how do we solve things that are challenges for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have to touch on the T-satellite, the translation thing. I wanted to ask you specifically, in the news recently, there was some mention that T-Mobile has created a dedicated enterprise NOC, and not a network operations center. Has that been something you've been involved in, or can you comment about how that changes the way the customers actually experience and gain trust with T-Mobile?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had the opportunity to help actually developing that with some of my business partners on the engineering side. So very close and near and dear to my heart. One thing that's happened since launching our business network operations center is now that we have the ability to quickly identify impacts to business customers. So it could be an issue that we might be seeing on a tower. It could be a weather event that's happening, and in partnership with the NOC team, monitoring our network and how business customers are utilizing the network, they can identify anomalies. So some great work has been done by the engineering team to be able to understand, oh, something is not normal. Do we need to figure out what's going on with it? And so once that anomaly is detected, the NOC can contact a dedicated technical resource that's assigned to an enterprise customer. Many of our enterprise, not all, but many of our enterprise customers have dedicated technical resources that know and understand their business. And so that person can then work back with this customer, whether that be an airline, whether that be, one of our public safety teams, could be one of the banks, let them know, hey, we're seeing this. And the customer can be like, oh, that's typical. We're gonna, a reset on our devices right now. And so yes, that is normal. Or it could be something of like, wow, I didn't know that was happening. And then we can go quickly into figuring it out. Customers have found that extremely beneficial, right? They are aware of what's going on, actively working that. There were times several years ago where you get a phone call that said, "Hey, something's not working," and I didn't necessarily have all the details. And now with the launch of the Enterprise Network Operations Center, we do have the ability to look at and understand that. And so a lot of hard work went into being able to create that. A lot of great work done by teams, and it allows us to have transparency in time of crisis, and that delivers and builds trust with the customers. Our customers know sometimes things are going to happen, but that transparency and that ability to understand what's going on is such an important piece for them.
Absolutely. The importance of communication, especially in times of crisis, is paramount, especially when things go wrong. Just knowing, hey, we're on it, we see it, we're working on it, that goes so far. I'm sure it was hard to get to build the support for this initiative, to put it all together, to tell the story and get and to rally people to understand how important this really is for the business. One of the things that I think you posted about recently was challenging CX leaders to stop building processes and start building experiences. Can you talk about the difference there? And if there's a leader listening to this who wants to make that switch, like where would you recommend they get started?
Yeah, I would say it's easy, and I would say more fun. It's really typical, right, to have a nice Visio flow or swim lanes that start with systems. A lot of times people start with the system steps that need to happen. All you gotta do is start with a paper or a whiteboard. My favorite is a whiteboard. And really just say, okay, well, let's look at it from the customer perspective. If I'm the customer, what am I gonna do? What's step one? What's step two? And then you build in the system piece and all of this stuff. And it's really about what's the lens when you go to put pen to paper, or you're drawing the boxes in a PowerPoint, however you're creating the experiences. is doing it from the perspective or that lens of the customer or the lens of your frontline individual that's interacting with the customer, whether that's sales or whether that's somebody on the service side, whether that is something even digitally, right? And looking at that digital experience, switching that lens, start to then ask different questions and think about it. So it can be kind of fun to be, like I said, I always find it fun. And then, like I said, it helps you understand where the customer is going to potentially have friction, where it's going to be a heavy lift, or in some cases, how many teams internally within your own company are going to interact with this. And so there's a lot of different ways then you can look and say, okay, do I want that many teams interacting? Do I want that many touch points for the customer? And so when you start to do that, it allows you to start to really look at it, identify, are there ways to make it more, are there things that are going to break? And so it's really about just changing your lens of when, like I said, so many customers or so many companies, a process or a system perspective, so things, what keys do I need to go hit? What API go have, and step back and do it from the customer perspective, and it may give you a different problem to go solve.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great tactical piece of advice there. There's a lot of talk about being customer centric. There's a lot of talk about being customer first, but it's examples like this that people can actually apply and see the benefit of that. I wanted to, as we head towards the end of the episode here, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your thoughts on the future and some of the exciting new things you've got going on at T-Mobile. Again, as somebody looking in from the outside, we've heard announcements from T-Mobile about a really exciting live translation feature and also T-Satellite. Could you share some stories or share the inside scoop on those two?
Yeah, I would say T satellite. The translation one I haven't had the opportunity to use yet, but I'm excited to be able to do it. But T satellite, it's such a great, well, one being in living in the Northwest, we have lots of areas of the mountains and stuff like that. If you think about, all of the things that happen in areas where there's not coverage, terrestrial coverage out there, the ability to have sight is so important because we saw even in the first couple weeks of the beta, we saw text messages to 911 where people needed help. You know, there's been times where I've been out in the mountains, fortunately not needed to use a 911 situation, but I've been out there and next no, my phone pops up and it just says satellite, says sat. There's no, weird moving to find the satellite or anything. It's just it automatically pops up. It's there. Know there's something that goes wrong, I have the ability to easily get back, to, get in contact with somebody. So it just really looks at all of the places, I think, from a safety perspective, is for me so important and was a really big piece in driving of that. And it's great because I'm not searching for satellite out there. They're there. It's easy. Now, some people are like, that was my peaceful time. Well, turn off your phone if you need it to be peaceful, right? And you don't want to have a text message coming in. That's fine. Turn off your phone, silence your phone. That's not. But the good news is it's there when you need it. And it was so early on in the beta that there were customers that were 911, so that it actually made a difference in saving people that were having some sort of crisis in the in areas that they wouldn't do just a few before. So I think it's pretty great. I think we're going to continue to see like be a big area that just gets rid of some of those coverage gaps that are happening in mountains and national parks and stuff like that, where having your traditional towers isn't possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as amazing as it is to travel around, to be outdoors, to be connected on your device, coverage gaps do exist. This is a reality. And whether you're riding a subway or whatever it is, and I think that it's become so good and we're so used to the coverage being so good that we really are almost shocked and I'm almost offended. It's how can cell service drop out here? This is unbelievable. I'm so used to always being connected. And I guess I wonder, like, right now, the cases that you're sharing are like emergencies. It's not like the main kind of bulk of usage. It's handling these really critical cases as the example. And maybe that's just in a beta phase. That's a starting point. But projecting into the future, a couple of years, where do you see that kind of experience of coverage going? Am I going to be hosting a podcast, live video feeds, two ways on a mountaintop in the near
You
future?
could, you could actually do that. You could definitely do that, and that's I think. a lot of it was built from how do we solve kind of the emergency problem of having that connectivity. I was up in the mountains around here. Gladly messages of the beautiful, stream that I was sitting next to having a picnic, with friends in the city to be able to do that. So you'll be able to do a podcast from a mountaintop, before you know it. And so I think it's just depending on how do you want to do that. But it really is going to allow to have, what matters most to them wherever they're at. And so it allows you to be able to share those key moments that are important, those that matter. And it's also a nice security thing in case, there's situation you get in trouble. So it is unlocked an entirely new area where there wasn't coverage, and for good reasons why, like I said, you may not be able to build traditional towers.
Yeah. So I personally, I lived in Japan for many years, and they have world-class infrastructure, right? Whether it's cell, power, utilities, trains, it's just, I think it's pretty well understood that Japan has really high quality infrastructure, and it's justified by the density, right? You can make those investments. It makes sense to put in more towers if you have more people in a small area, obviously. And to your point, like if you're on the top of Mount Rainier, it's pretty hard to put a tower up there and really hard to justify the cost. But with satellite, just blanket the whole planet. And yeah, there's the emergency angle of it. One thing, again, just being excited about the technology here, but one thing I've really started to feel, especially more and more with AI in my personal life, is the power of using voice, the power of getting away from a keyboard, essentially, to interact with technology and to be able to go for a walk in the park and be in a different environment, to be healthier, honestly, than sitting in a chair in a room. But I can be really productive. I can have a chat with your favorite AI agent, right? Your favorite chat tool. So I think there's the emergency angle of it, but there's also this angle of, yeah, like maybe I could have my office could be hiking a trail, right? I could be out having a healthy lifestyle. So I think there's a lot of angles here that maybe people aren't quite imagining yet, but I'm personally really excited about that future and excited to hear, about companies like T-Mobile building this.
Yeah, it's going to allow beyond the traditional four walls of an office building or a home, and do really anything that you want to be able to do.
Definitely. So I want to finish the episode with a final question for you. When you're looking at what's coming over the horizon, let's say the next 3 to 5 years, what are the things that you're focused on? What do you think the things that AI is going to solve? What are the opportunities there? And maybe a thought for other leaders, something that they can think about and maybe focus on.
Yeah, and I think, and then continue to evolve and figure out what is the interactions, with, between AI and human and customers. So I think there's going to continue evolution there, and thinking about what are the right places and where do you want those interactions. But I also think, and especially if companies aren't doing this today, AI should be able to, remove most of the manual processes. There's so many times, and you know, people that I talk to in the industry, everybody's got back office teams doing manual thing, and it takes a long time. And honestly, anytime you have people doing manual stuff, there's potential errors, and so I think really we're going to see AI move a lot of that. I think whether it's manual processes, whether it's validating that work is getting done correctly, all of those things, which I think will be a benefit for customers. It's going to improve the speed to whatever solution that they need. It's going to improve accuracy, and that's going to be important things. I think that happen over the next couple of years. And if you're not doing that over the next couple of years, I think you're going to be behind, because that is ways to be to take that money and invest it elsewhere, where you want to grow. And so I also think there's opportunities that investment in AI to do some of that stuff that allows you to then reinvest the resources elsewhere and grow your company, or to grow what you're trying to accomplish, or hit the next target for a company. So for me, that's where I think a lot of it's going, as well as I think the structure of how do you continue to evolve kind of that agentic AI space, interacting with customers. And I think there's still a lot of testing and learning, and exciting things happening in that space as well.
Absolutely. Really excited about that future, a future that's better for consumers, better for customers, saving people from the drudge work, the manual labor, reducing the errors, to your point. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and now's the time for people to really lean in and explore. So on that note, I would like to wrap up this episode. This has been the CX Files with Kimberly Wyman of T-Mobile. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.